The left wasn't as crazy under Bush and Obama. They just weren't. And I was not going to hold my tongue when they went to places where, I mean, you know, college kids marching for Hamas. Don't tell me there hasn't been a change.
Right.
And the victim culture, the cancel culture, she's not part of what they suspect she might be, sort of a stealth version of the worst excesses of the left. I said there's a coalition of Trump voters, people who really like him. They certainly are those. And then there's people who don't necessarily like him that much, but they still think he's less crazy.
That's not how it went down. Instead of stepping back, they pushed even harder. Their nonstop efforts to bring down Trump have made them overlook their own inconsistencies. But Bill Maher wasn't about to ignore it. He spoke up boldly, pointing out their over-the-top reactions with clear and direct commentary. No fluff, just straight talk. And yes, we've got all the proof to show it. Things are about to get interesting. Maher's newest focus? MSNBC's Joe Scarborough. Scarborough tried to steer Maher into criticizing the Republican Party, but Maher didn't go along. Instead, he turned the spotlight back on Scarborough and Democratic leaders, with one smart and unexpected response. Take a listen.
How long have we
After all
been
these
doing
years,
this? I'm serious. What has it been?
I don't know. Well, you were on Politically Incorrect, right? That was the 90s when you were a congressman from Florida.
The 90s, exactly. And first show I was on, this guy stands up and points at me. He goes, "You're a racist."
Who's that? Who was it?
I forget who it was. And then you defended me.
Did he mean it?
Of course he meant it. But
well, he's a comedian.
I was from the South. He's a comedian. I wasn't insulted by it. I bet you stood up for me.
Well, that is a fundamental problem we've had for a long time. Well, two problems. One, there are racists in the Republican Party,
now,
as many people have. Well, I mean, there always have been. There used to be more in the Democratic Party. They were the Dixiecrat. But as someone once said, you know, is every Republican a racist? Of course not. But if you're a racist, that is the party you're going to gravitate toward. But also there is a big problem of calling every Republican a racist and calling everything racism.
If you're not familiar with the backstory, here's a quick rundown. Joe Scarborough was once a Republican congressman, but over the years, his views shifted more to the left, though he doesn't openly admit it. These days, it's pretty clear he leans toward the Democratic side. In the clip we mentioned earlier, Scarborough tried to steer the conversation in a predictable direction, accusing Republicans of racism. But Bill Maher didn't go along with it. Instead, he called out the Democrats for having their own issues with racial double standards. That's when Scarborough started to look uneasy. But Maher didn't back down. In fact, he pressed the issue even more.
The left wasn't as crazy under Bush and Obama. They just weren't. And I was not going to hold my tongue.
Back in the days of Bush and Obama, the political left wasn't nearly as extreme as it is now. You can really see how much things have changed. And Bill Maher wasn't about to stay silent. He was just getting started. Meanwhile, Joe Scarborough looked clearly uncomfortable, caught off guard by where the conversation was heading. You could tell he didn't expect this turn. He seemed to think Maher was still the same person who used to jump at any chance to criticize Republicans. But that version of Maher is long gone. Now Maher is more independent, more direct, and not afraid to speak out against both parties. That clearly rattled Scarborough. He shifted in his seat, gave a few awkward smiles, and tried to take the high road. But Maher kept going. He pushed back against the usual lines and made it clear he's not playing for any political team.
College kids marching for Hamas? Don't tell me there hasn't been a change.
Right.
And the victim culture, the cancel culture.
I will say this, though. As far, listen, I agree. There's been a change on the left. But let's just talk about Hamas for a second. Let's talk about college campuses. I remember back when I started Scarborough Country in 2003, we were talking about the radicalism at Columbia, the anti-Semitism coming in from the college professors. I don't know that that's changed that much. I think there's been anti-Semitism at elite colleges for a really long time.
I don't think it's rooted in anti-Semitism. I think it's rooted in anti-colonialism and their erroneous view that the Israelis are colonizers, you know.
Like, somebody should really tell them that, like, European colonialists killed 6 million of them not too long ago.
Exactly. I mean, that's just part of it, but certainly that's a relevant thing to bring up. But, colonialism, which now is mostly a thing of the past in the world, due to the work of other generations.
Well, it was obvious. Scarborough was growing more uneasy as the conversation touched on topics he wasn't ready to defend. Right then, he switched gears. This time, he brought up anti-Semitism and colonialism, typical tactics to change the subject. And that's the problem. Whenever someone starts holding the political left accountable, the same thing tends to happen. They dodge the issue, shift the focus, or try to rewrite the rules. But the rise in anti-Semitism didn't just begin under President Biden. It's been building for a while, fueled by confusing messages and extreme views from the far left. Just look at some of today's college campuses. Certain student groups have shown public support for violent groups after the October 7th attacks. Then, you have members of Congress like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, who have made strong anti-Israel comments that many say cross the line into anti-Semitism. And when they're criticized, they often defend themselves by calling it a fight for justice or anti-colonialism. The result? A troubling trend where anti-Semitism is not only overlooked, it's being repackaged as a political opinion. Bill Maher sees exactly what's going on. Scarborough, on the other hand, doesn't seem to.
It's anti-historical. The Jews were there 700 years before Islam even existed. Or more, probably 1,700 years, but certainly the temple was built a long time before Islam came along in the 7th century, 6th century. There's always been a presence there. There was a UN resolution that said divide the land. One group went with it, one group never has agreed to it. And let's be honest, a lot of that is because the says Jews bad. I think we could solve this if that wasn't, if that wasn't a big part of like why they hate having them in that region. Most people around the world that have territorial disputes, it doesn't go on forever.
This was, without question, one of the most straightforward and honest takes on the Israel-Palestine conflict we've heard in a long time. Bill Maher didn't sugarcoat anything. He laid out the facts clearly, without trying to push a political agenda. If more major news outlets presented it this way, maybe we wouldn't see so many people joining protests based more on emotion than real understanding. But here's the reality. Most of the media won't touch it. Whether it's fear of criticism, political bias, or something deeper, they often avoid showing the full story. Instead, they air short clips and simplified versions that stir emotions but leave out important context. The result? A lot of young Americans are getting a one-sided view. They're chanting slogans without knowing the full history or what's really at stake. They're being led by emotion in a situation that calls for careful thought, not media hype. And Maher? He pulled back the curtain and showed just how harmful that kind of reporting can be.
We could talk about Israel for the entire time here, but I want to get back to you haven't changed. So you consider yourself a liberal, right?
I consider myself an old school liberal. You have to make that distinction now because, the word woke, which started out as a good thing, being alert to injustice, and a lot of people get triggered by the word because when they hear it, they think of the old meaning, which was good.
Right.
Stay woke. But I'm sorry, language is a living, breathing entity. Words change and they migrate and they take on a different meaning. And woke now has to answer for people have just used the word to ascribe a number of extreme things on the...
It just wasn't Joe Scarborough's night. His usual strategy didn't work, and no matter how many times he tried, he couldn't get Bill Maher to go off on Republicans. Each time he tried to steer the talk in that direction, it completely backfired. Instead, Maher shifted the spotlight to the political left and the media outlets that constantly back them up. Maher didn't hold anything back. He was sharp, direct, and openly critical of the left's growing push towards so-called woke culture, the very ideas Scarborough now seems to support. You could feel the tension. Scarborough, a seasoned journalist with years in the game, looked uneasy, like he knew he had lost control of the conversation. He clearly wanted to shift gears to get things back on track, but there was no easy way out. Maher had taken over, and Scarborough was just trying to keep up. And Joe wasn't the only one feeling the heat. Maher also had some strong words for Vice President Kamala Harris.
I was talking about it in the editorial tonight. Kamala's big, challenge here to win over the undecided voters is to convince them that she's not part of what they suspect she might be, sort of a stealth version of the worst excesses of the left. I said there's a coalition of Trump voters, people who really like him. They certainly are those. And then there's people who don't necessarily like him that much, but they still think he's less crazy than stuff that strikes them as aggressively anti-common sense. That takes place on the left.
Kamala Harris couldn't shake the image of being closely tied to the far left wing of her party. No matter how carefully she spoke in interviews or public appearances, the message always felt the same. More about identity and political correctness than actual results. Her focus on labels and alignment with outspoken progressive voices made it seem like image mattered more than real impact. And people noticed. Many voters looked past the headlines and scripted speeches. What they really wanted was down-to-earth leadership, not more talk about equity or trendy buzzwords. Harris's choice not to distance herself from the party's more extreme voices ended up hurting her politically. It wasn't just her personal approval that took a hit. It affected support for the broader Democratic platform. Last year's election results told the story. A lot of Americans made it clear they're done with symbolic politics. They want real solutions and leaders who deliver. Feeling that shift, Joe Scarborough tried once more to steer the conversation back to safer ground.
Easy to say. Yeah, I said that in 2019. I was in a competitive thing. Now, she did say, I think she said this was the law under Trump, too. He didn't change it. But it's very easy to say, I don't believe that anymore. And on that issue, she should. I wanted to ask you, so you're an old line liberal.
I think so.
I'm an old line conservative. I still believe in the balanced budgets, a strong southern border, a tough reaction to military aggression from Russia, et cetera, et cetera. And yet you and I find ourselves, I think, more in the same place because of the extremes on both sides. Talk about how crazy things have gotten and how we got here.
Well, that's it. I feel like I speak for a different group of people. You ask why the audience is different. That's why. Because I want a group of people who are not ideologically captured by either side. Tired of the extremes and the extremists who dominate the debate. They have the megaphone and we hear them more, but I don't think they represent what most people in the country talk about. I think almost any issue you could actually come up with a reasonable middle ground. In the overtime segment tonight, the subject of race and we were talking about young men who are now like in college, the ones who are going to need affirmative action. You have to, on the one hand, understand you benefited from racism if you're white. There's no doubt about it. And that has to be addressed. It can't be ignored. But also, I didn't personally do it. There's a middle ground there. It's very difficult.
That's exactly why so many people continue to respect Bill Maher. He says what he thinks without towing any party line. In a time when most voices are stuck on either extreme, Maher stands in the middle, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's rare. Most real-world issues aren't as simple as left or right. The truth often lives somewhere in between, where logic, respect, and workable solutions can actually meet. Sure, some problems are tough to compromise on, but too often, people take sides without asking tough questions. If we're willing to have honest conversations and rethink our own views, that middle ground is possible. And let's be clear, choosing the middle path isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It takes strength to think for yourself, especially when everyone else is picking teams. That's what Maher shows us. The value of independent thinking. That wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more straight shooting, no spin content. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.